Adanna seemed determined to live unlike her mother's other children, but there were moments when her mother Agnes would wake at night to find her daughter gone, only to see her minutes later at the window, lips moving in silent conversation with the dark. The village whispered. Words like Ogbanje passed from mouth to mouth, spirit child, one who moves between the living and the dead, who comes and goes to torment her mother. Agnes prayed, gave offerings, and tied protective charms to Adanna's waist, but the unease never left her. When Adanna was 13, in Succa, where the earth was the color of rust and the harmattan wind carried fine dust across the hills, there grew an ancient Udala tree. No one knew exactly how old it was, but the elders said it had stood there since the time when men still spoke with the gods in daylight. Beneath its wide green canopy, families gathered to rest, lovers met in secret, and children played until the shadows lengthened. The tree had witnessed births, weddings, and burials. It had also witnessed things people did not speak of aloud. It was under this tree that Adanna was born. The day was strange, the sky heavy with clouds, thunder rolling although it was the middle of the dry season. The women in the birthing room said the air had felt charged, as though something unseen had stepped into the compound to watch. When the midwife placed Adanna into her mother's arms, the child's eyes were open, clear and sharp, as though she were not seeing for the first time but remembering. Agnes, who had lost 3 children before Adanna, felt both relief and unease. She recognized those eyes from her dreams, eyes that had looked at her from the darkness, eyes that had turned away just as she reached out. Adanna grew into a quiet, watchful child. She did not laugh easily, but when she did, it rang like the first drops of rain after a long drought. She wandered to places children did not go, the back of the yam barn, the edges of the forest, returning with pockets full of feathers, river pebbles, and the kind of small, mysterious treasures one cannot explain. Twice before her 3rd birthday, her small chest stopped rising. The first time was from a fever, the second from drowning in a water pot. Both times, she returned to life without a mark. Adanna seemed determined to live unlike her mother's other children, but there were moments when her mother Agnes would wake at night to find her daughter gone, only to see her minutes later at the window, lips moving in silent conversation with the dark. The village whispered. Words like Ogbanje passed from mouth to mouth, spirit child, one who moves between the living and the dead, who comes and goes to torment her mother. Agnes prayed, gave offerings, and tied protective charms to Adanna's waist, but the unease never left her. When Adanna was 13, the rhythm of her strange existence broke. She fell ill without warning, no fever, no pain, just a sudden stillness that spread through her like water seeping into dry earth. This time, there was no return. The wail that tore from Agnes's throat silenced the compound. Grief hardened into resolve, and she carried her daughter's body to the village Dibia. The air inside smelled of burning herbs and earth, thick with the weight of spirits. The Dibia worked through the night, chanting and pouring libations, calling on the ancestors to loosen their grip. Just before dawn, Adanna's chest rose with a shudder, and she gasped as though surfacing from deep water. She was alive again, but joy turned quickly to unease. The Dibia, weary from his labor, spoke the condition that sealed her future. For Adanna to remain in the land of the living, she must be married to his eldest son before her 18th birthday. Only then would her spirit be bound fully to earth. Without that marriage, he warned, her soul would once again slip back to the other side. Her parents left the shrine in silence, their hearts heavy. They were grateful beyond words for her restored life, yet burdened by the strange demand. She was still a child, yet her fate was already written. Still, they resolved to do everything in their power to keep her alive. In the months that followed, Adanna lived without the sickness and sudden fainting spells that had haunted her youth. For the first time, she enjoyed a taste of peace. She joined the other girls at the market, wove mats with her mother, and laughed freely with her friends. The shadows that had clung to her seemed to drift away, and the family almost began to believe she had escaped the curse. One afternoon, she and her closest friend carried a bundle of clothes to the village stream to wash. The water sparkled under the sun, and the chatter of women filled the air. As they scrubbed and rinsed, a mischievous boy from the village, Solomon Jude, wandered by. He was known for his tricks, and that day he could not resist troubling Adanna. With a playful shove, he dragged her toward the deeper part of the stream. The laughter of onlookers turned to screams when Adanna slipped beneath the water. For a moment, the river seemed determined to claim her. Just then, a car from the neighboring village pulled up at the bank, a rare sight in their small community. A wealthy woman and her handsome 16-year-old son, also named Solomon, had come to wash their clothes by the water. Hearing the commotion, the boy dove in without hesitation. Stronger and taller than the village children, he pulled Adanna from the current, lifting her head above the rushing stream until she coughed water and breathed again. The wealthy woman, relieved, fussed over Adanna on the riverbank. She marveled at the girl's beauty, remarking on her bright eyes and gentle face. With kindness, she offered to drive Adanna and her friend back to their home, sparing them the long walk in wet clothes beneath the hot sun. When Adanna and her friend reached home that evening, her mother received them with a mixture of relief and fury. She thanked the wealthy woman and her son for bringing her daughter back, bowing with gratitude. But the moment they left, her voice hardened. She scolded Adanna for going to the river, for disobeying her repeated warnings, for flirting with danger when she already lived with enough of it in her fragile body. Adanna said nothing. She sat quietly, her wet wrapper clinging to her thin frame, her heart heavy. Shame pressed down on her like a stone. She blamed herself for everything, for always being the weak one, the girl who fainted without warning, the one who could be claimed by sickness or spirit at the slightest turn. Now the handsome boy who had saved her knew her secret too, that she was an Ogbanje, a spirit child who belonged neither fully to life nor death. The thought of his pity pierced her. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wishing she could see him again, if only to thank him properly. The months that followed were strangely calm. Adanna remained healthy, no fainting spells or strange fevers disturbing her peace. Yet beneath this calmness, her family lived with the shadow of the Dibia's prophecy. The condition of her survival weighed on them all. Before her 18th birthday, she must marry the Dibia's eldest son. Her father, Papa Obis, could not accept it easily. He loved his daughter fiercely. Among all his children, Adanna was the brightest flame, his golden child. She excelled in school, her handwriting neat, her answers always quick, her curiosity endless. He dreamed of seeing her become someone greater, a nurse, a teacher, perhaps even more. Not a housewife bound to a native doctor's son, who could not even read or write. Yet he said little, because life itself hung on this bargain. Dreams were fragile things in the face of death. On one bright Eek market day, Adanna accompanied her mother to buy spices and palm oil. The market buzzed with traders calling out their wares, with goats bleating and women balancing baskets of yams on their heads. It was there, between the rows of fabric sellers, that she saw him again. Solomon, the boy from the river. She wanted to turn away, to hide her face, but before she could slip past, he saw her. His smile lit up his whole face, and he called her name, running toward her. Heat rushed to her cheeks. She could not meet his eyes at first, but when she finally did, she saw properly how handsome he was, and something fluttered deep within her. They walked together through the market, and in his easy way, he told her about himself. His mother, he said, owned one of the largest boutiques in the market, selling fine lace and glittering gold jewelry. He was only there that day to help her, because he was home from boarding school for the holidays. His words came with pride, but without boastfulness, and Adanna found herself listening intently. Then he told her about something that made her heart stumble, a scholarship examination. A chance, he explained, that could earn her a place at his prestigious school, one of the finest in all of eastern Nigeria. He encouraged her to try, his voice full of certainty that she could succeed. When Adanna returned home, her mind whirled. She wanted it, oh how she wanted it. The thought of classrooms filled with opportunity, of a life bigger than her small village, of proving herself more than the weak spirit child everyone pitied. But the prophecy bound her like chains. How could she tell Solomon that she was destined for another path? That her future had already been sold to the Dibia's son, an illiterate man nearly 3 times her age? The thought crushed her, and that night she sobbed quietly into her pillow. Her father noticed her moodiness over the week that followed. At last, he asked her why she was sad. Through tears, she told him about the scholarship, about Solomon's encouragement, about her longing and her despair. She said there was no use in trying, no point in dreaming, because she already knew what her future held. Papa Obis listened, then placed his hand on her shoulder. He told her not to throw away tomorrow's light for fear of today's shadow. Tomorrow, he said gently, would carry its own worries. Today she could still try. Her mother disagreed. She protested bitterly, accusing her husband of filling their daughter with false hope. Why encourage her to dream of a future they all knew she could never have? To Agnes, such encouragement was cruelty, a promise destined to break Adanna's heart. But Papa Obi stood firm. He could not silence the small, stubborn hope within him, the hope that his daughter's fate might yet bend in a new direction. And so, between a mother's caution and a father's daring, Adanna's heart hung trembling, caught between prophecy and possibility. Adanna prepared for the scholarship examination with quiet determination. Every night she sat under the glow of a kerosene lantern, bent over her notebooks, whispering her father's words to herself. Do not throw away tomorrow's light for fear of today's shadow. Even if she was destined to marry the Dibia's son, she told herself, this would be her last examination. If fate had written her end, then at least she would leave behind the memory of trying, of giving her best. When the day of the exam came, Adanna's heart pounded as she filled each page with her answers. She wrote carefully, the way she always did, her handwriting steady, her thoughts clear. When it was over, she felt both relief and emptiness, as though she had left a piece of herself on those sheets of paper. The waiting was the hardest part. Days passed into weeks, and while she awaited the results, she returned to her routines. She swept the compound, fetched water from the stream, helped her mother prepare soup, and watched over her younger siblings. Life stretched on as though nothing extraordinary were about to happen. Yet in those days, something new bloomed quietly in her heart. Solomon began to visit their village more often. Sometimes he arrived on his bicycle, pedaling fast down the dusty path, his school uniform tucked neatly, a satchel slung across his chest. Other times he came on foot, carrying kola nuts or roasted groundnuts to share. Together they wandered along the narrow paths that wound between cassava farms, chasing each other like children, laughing until their sides ached. They plucked ripe mangoes from low branches and ate them, juice dripping down their wrists. At the stream, they skipped pebbles across the water, counting how many times each one bounced before sinking. In the evenings, when the sun dipped low, they sat beneath the great Udala tree, carving shapes into the soil with sticks and talking about their dreams. Solomon spoke of boarding school life, the competitions, the library filled with books, the teachers who spoke with accents from faraway lands. Adanna listened with wide eyes, imagining herself there, imagining a world bigger than the village she had always known. Sometimes she shared her own dreams with him, shyly at first, then with growing courage. In his presence, the shadow of the Dibia's prophecy felt smaller, as though his laughter could chase it away. Then the results were announced. Out of the 67 students who sat for the exam, only one name from her village was chosen. Adanna. The news spread like fire. That evening, she hurried to tell Solomon. His joy overflowed as he clapped his hands and beamed at her, already talking of how wonderful it would be to welcome her into his school the next term. His excitement wrapped around her like warmth, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe she might truly have another path. When she carried the news home, her family erupted with happiness. Her father's eyes glistened with pride as he called her his golden child. Even her mother, though cautious, could not hide her relief at seeing her daughter's dreams take root. They clapped, they danced, they sang Thanksgiving songs that floated into the night air. But just as their celebration reached its height, a sharp knock sounded at the compound gate. The singing fell silent, the drumbeats of their joy stilled. Papa Obi's opened the gate, and there stood the Dibia, his staff of authority in hand, his eldest son by his side. They had come, not to celebrate, but to claim. The Dibia's son, now ready for marriage, saw no reason to wait. The time, they declared, had come to begin preparations. The prophecy had spoken. The promise had been made. The laughter of a moment before curdled into unease. Adanna's joy, so fresh and alive, trembled on the edge of something darker. For though her name was on the scholarship list, so too was it bound to the Dibia's shrine. And the night that began in celebration ended in silence, heavy with the weight of two paths, one of light, one of shadow, and the girl who stood between them. The Dibia's visit left a heaviness in the compound. His words had been clear, his son's eyes fixed on Adanna like a possession already claimed. When they departed, the echo of their staff against the earth lingered long after, like a drumbeat that refused to fade. Papa Obi sat quietly that night, his wrapper loosely tied, his head in his hands. He loved his daughter too much to surrender her so easily, yet he knew the danger of defying a man like the Dibia. The prophecy was a cage, its bars invisible but unyielding. Still in his heart, he resolved to resist, not with open confrontation, but with time. If he could delay the marriage long enough, perhaps fate itself might shift. Adanna, meanwhile, retreated into herself. The joy of her scholarship news was quickly overshadowed by fear. Each time she remembered the Dibia's son, his rough hands, his heavy voice, the way his eyes held no kindness, her body trembled. She imagined herself bound to him, her books abandoned, her dreams crushed beneath the weight of a life she did not choose. Yet whenever she thought of Solomon, a different fire burned within her. His laughter echoed in her mind, his encouragement rang in her ears. She remembered their walks through the cassava fields, the mango juice dripping down their chins, the long talks beneath the Udala tree. With him she felt seen, not as an Ogbanje to be pitied, but as a girl with a mind and heart of her own. Her mother, Agnes, noticed the changes in her daughter, the flickers of joy, the sudden silences, the way her face lit up at the mention of school yet dimmed again when the Dibia's name was spoken. She grew restless, torn between two fears, the fear of losing her daughter to death, and the fear of breaking her spirit with a loveless marriage. She clung to tradition for safety, yet her heart ached each time she saw Adanna's eyes cloud with sorrow. The village, too, began to whisper. Some said the scholarship was a blessing meant to lift their community's name. Others muttered that it was a dangerous distraction, tempting Adanna away from the path that had already been carved for her. Women at the market wagged their tongues, debating whether she belonged more to the schoolhouse or the shrine. As days turned into weeks, Papa Obis did his best to shield Adanna. Whenever the Dibia sent word, he responded with gentle excuses. The girl was still too young, the harvest was near, the marriage feast would require preparation. Each delay was a thread of hope, though he knew they could not hold back the tide forever. Adanna, in those waiting days, threw herself into helping her mother and preparing for her new school term. She reread her notes by lantern light, and when Solomon visited, she stole moments of happiness, moments that felt like stolen treasures, bright and fleeting. They walked the village paths at dusk, sharing roasted corn, laughing at the goats that chased one another through the dust. They raced each other down the slope to the stream, and though she never won, Adanna cherished the sound of his teasing laughter. They sat beneath the Udala tree, watching the fireflies flicker like living stars, dreaming aloud of the future. Yet beneath it all, a shadow followed her. For every dream she shared, a whisper of doubt trailed after. Will I live to see it? Will I belong to him, or to the Dibia's son? And so the days swayed like a pendulum, between joy and dread, between her father's quiet resistance and her mother's anxious warnings. Adanna stood at the edge of two worlds, one filled with promise, the other bound by fear. The Udala tree stood tall at the heart of the village, its branches heavy with fruit, silent witness to her laughter with Solomon, silent witness to her tears in the night. It knew, as only trees do, that storms were coming,